Welcome back to the FTN NFL Draft Team Preview Series. I'm your host, Mike Randle. You can follow me on Twitter at Randle Rant. We continue our mission here to get you ready for the NFL Draft, which is only just a little bit more than a month away. And today we bring in someone with tremendous insight. Greg Auman. I've had Greg on multiple times, does an outstanding job. He is now covering the NFC South for Fox Sports. Bucks, Falcons, Panthers, and Saints, and he has been covering the Bucks since 2013, so he's the perfect person to bring in here to talk about Tampa Bay. Follow him on Twitter at Greg Auman. Greg, thanks for a few minutes here. I know you're busy. How you doing?
Good, Mike. Good. Thanks for having me on.
So we have to start at the top here. Tampa Bay found a way to win the division last year, Greg. Up and down, of course. Brady's last year, a lot of changes. Let's do a quick recap here of last season. Found their way in the playoffs, really trying to change players here, but still winning, still finding success.
Yeah, for them to be 8-9 last year, for Tom Brady to have a losing record, I mean, that's a disappointing season. And then you can say they won the division, so they have to kind of hang your hat on that. They hadn't won back-to-back division titles in the franchise's history, but then to lose as emphatically as they did in the Cowboys to the first round, definitely a disappointing year. Having said that, I think the goal is very much to try and do the same this year, to get back and win a bad division, probably an improving division. It might not take more than 9-10 wins to do that in 2023.
Absolutely true. Now, some coaching changes at the top. A lot of issues with the offense in the past. Offensive coordinator have made some changes here. Talk about the coaching staff here and how we're looking heading into 2023.
Yeah, big changes on offense. Dave Canales comes in from Seattle, first-time offensive coordinator, has been with Pete Carroll, I think it's 13, 14 years. Kind of came up through the ranks, but was their quarterback's coach, kind of, very involved in a breakout year for Geno Smith this past season. I think they're kind of hoping for more of the same with a similar older quarterback who's been a starter, has been a high draft pick. They're kind of hoping to get more out of Baker Mayfield. But yeah, he's new. Your running backs coach, Skip Pete, came in from Dallas. New quarterbacks coach, at least new to the role, and Thaddeus Lewis, who had been the assistant receivers coach here. Brad Idzik comes in as the receivers coach, had worked with Canales in Seattle. And then a new outside linebackers coach as well. Went and got George Edwards, who'd been with Dallas as well. So, yeah, big changes and a new play caller on offense. So hoping to get a little bit more out of, what's essentially the same cast minus Tom Brady at quarterback.
And let's get into the quarterback position. So my question is, did you know all along this was probably going to be Brady's last year? I mean, there's rumors here going around nationally. He's going to resign this and that. So talk about Brady ending here. Did you know he was going to go? And then, of course, Baker Mayfield. We do an article here at FTN, Quarterback Carousel, where about a month and a half ago we guessed who the quarterback's going to be. Was Baker Mayfield a player they had targeted, or did that come in late as they were trying to figure out here how they're going to replace Brady?
Yeah, kind of thought that Tom Brady was in his last year. Guy had already retired once, came back, kind of a wobbly year at age 45. So, no, I had thought, I mean, again, you try not to take anything for granted with Tom Brady because he can surprise you either way, but I had thought this was the last year. And I think he's kind of reinforced that and doing some other things post-football now. All the teams that he was supposed to go to have kind of linked themselves to quarterbacks. As far as Baker Mayfield, no, I felt like he had the most upside within the budget that the Bucs are operating under. They don't have a lot of money to spend on the quarterback. So anybody that wanted a bigger name, whether it's Derek Carr or Lamar Jackson or even like a Jimmy Garoppolo, was probably out of range. But to be able to get Baker Mayfield for what's essentially a $4 million contract, he can add to that with incentives. But it felt like the two that made the most sense in that mid-range were Baker Mayfield and Jacoby Brissett. Brissett probably the safer pick of the two, I think. But I think they like the upside and thinking they might be able to get him back to the form that Mayfield had, in 2020 with the Browns when he's got 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, two big receivers that were a big part of that offense. But they probably don't, want to have him close to what he was last year in terms of struggling with two different teams in two bad situations. Only 2 wins as a starter last year. Things can be much better, and they're trying to get him back to kind of who he was at his peak in Cleveland.
Yeah, now let's talk about the weapons. He's going to have a bevy of weapons, but some changes here, Greg. It looks like in the backfield, touchdown Lenny, no more. So talk here about the other offensive weapons here for the Bucs that Baker Mayfield's going to have in 2023.
Yeah, this was the worst run game in the NFL last year. Last in yards per carry, last in yards per game. Leonard Fournette was supposed to make $7 million this year, and they kind of, again, with some cap crunch decisions to make, let him go. So it definitely speaks well for Rachaad White, who definitely shown flashes last year. Had really had a couple of big games, was probably their better back in the second half of the season once they went to him more. So he can take a much bigger role. I mean, right now, the only back they've added is Chase Edmonds, who's more of a complimentary back, a pass-catching back. They have Keyshawn Vaughn, who's in his fourth year at the end of his rookie contract. Really didn't do much last year, barely got on the field at all. They could still add a back in theory here. I don't expect them to. I don't expect them to get out of the Zeke Elliott sweepstakes here. So, no, it'll just be a lot more Rachaad White, and they hope a little better productivity than what they had last year.
And certainly fortifying the offensive line here, which you mentioned, Greg, was fantastic a few years ago, just dominant, and last year struggled. So thoughts on that free agents here, either O-line and defensive side of the ball as well here coming into the next season?
Yeah, they lost 2 starters on the offensive line. They traded Shaq Mason just in a pick swap to the Texans again to get cap space, and then cut Donovan Smith, who's been their left tackle the last 9 years. So, they have Tristan Wirfs back. They'll have a healthy Ryan Jensen. And then it's a lot of young guys that they just have to hope continue to develop, whether that's Nick Leverett or Robert Hainsey or Brandon Walton. I would think they're going to draft somebody as well. If the right guy is there at 19 in the first round, they could draft the tackle even. We don't know whether Wirfs will stay on the right side where he's been an all-pro, or whether they try and move him to the left side. He's about to get paid, so that only makes it more expensive if they move him over to left tackle. But we'll have some new starters and some new guys in bigger roles in the offensive line for sure.
And you mentioned the NFL draft here. Let's talk about the targets. What are you hearing? What do you think? We're about a month away. A lot of things can change, but pro days are happening. Had the Combine, Senior Bowl here. Just a tricky thing. Bucks have had so much success. They're looking to actually reload here without a full rebuild, which many teams can't do. I would think that would start with the draft. You mentioned their first pick there at overall number 19.
Yeah, 19 is a tough spot because you don't necessarily know who's going to fall there. The obvious positional matches are probably defensive line and safety right now. They're the two that they really haven't addressed. If they hadn't brought Jamel Dean back, I would have said corner would be high on the list, but I feel like they have 2 solid outside corners. They need a slot. So honestly, a slot who could double as a safety would make a lot of sense. We just did a mock draft at Fox this week. I had them sliding back a couple picks and still getting Brian Branch from Alabama. Really smart, heady safety. Todd Bowles is an old safety himself. Asks a lot of his safeties. And with Mike Edwards gone now, with Logan Ryan and Keanu O'Neal unsigned, there's going to be change at that position. They need a starter. So it wouldn't surprise me if they went safety, although taking one at 19 isn't always the best use in terms of positional values and stuff like that. D-line would not surprise me at all. They had 5 free agents on their D-line. Akeem Hicks isn't back. Will Golston right now isn't back. They did bring in Greg Gaines from the Rams, so they've got a solid replacement there, and I think they'll probably hope that Logan Hall can step up and be more like the guy that was their top draft pick a year ago.
Great stuff as always. Last question, then we'll get you out of here. Know you're busy. Do you see any other moves happening? What do you see on the horizon here? Tampa Bay has won the division 2 years in a row. Sort of an interesting situation here with the NFC South. Some changes here and there. New players coming in. Carr over with the Saints. So talk about, do you see anything else coming in? And how do you think the season will go here right now? A lot of players with the draft coming up. But what are your early instincts here for 2023 with Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I mean, the division is wide open. I mean, you think about last year, Bucks won it, but all 4 teams were within 1 win of each other. And like you said, they've all been active. I mean, Panthers went out and got Frank Reich as the first coach hired. They traded up to get the first pick in the draft. They've been active in free agency, probably more than people expected. To add a guy like Miles Sanders and Hayden Hurst, Adam Thielen, they're probably not done there. Von Bell on defense. Falcons, I think we knew would spend a lot. They've been busy, but they don't necessarily have a quarterback that's going to scare anybody right now with Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder as the 2 there. New Orleans, I thought, has weathered their cap struggles very well to be able to bring in a guy like Derek Carr, to be able to bring in Jamal Williams. Took some hits on defense for sure on their defensive front, but they'll be right there. So I think every team in this division can go in with some level of optimism that they can be contending in December and January for this division title. Bucks have a first place schedule. That doesn't make it easier. But no, I think there's still moves to be made before the draft. The Bucks are at a point, I think most of these teams in the division, maybe Atlanta has some money to spend, but most of the teams in the division are at that point where you're getting 1 year, $3 million or less contracts. You're trying to find bargains and depth right now, and that's what they're doing. So they're not done yet by any means, but probably no huge splash signings or anything like that.
Well, you talk about confidence. When I talk to Greg Auman, I always get insight, and today did not disappoint us at all, folks. Follow Greg Auman at Greg Auman on Twitter. Covers the NFC South for Fox Sports. Greg, thanks so much for a few minutes here. Would love to check in with you as we get closer to the draft. Just a lot of great stuff going on. We have March Madness finishing up, but the NFL draft's going to be here, and the NFL gets front and center, of course, as they always are. So thanks so much here for a few minutes. Appreciate it.
Oh, no. Thanks for having me, Mike. We'll do it again soon.